While that was happening in the sky, the ground started speaking. Utah canyons, Cappadocia's honeycombed rock, shafts in Argentina that didn't make sense on any survey. Teams took samples. Some walls carried scorched bands hardened into a gloss you don't get from campfires. In the dust, metallic flecks you could pull with a magnet. Independent labs argued, geological processes can mimic heat events. Mining leaves residues. All true. And yet, similar signatures kept showing up continents apart, in places where Type 3 activity never seemed to go away. What nobody knew at the time was how the pieces fit. Triangular formations held position, separated at distances that kept repeating no matter the altitude. Dwell, pulse, pace, then nothing. Hours later, the same geometry returned 200 miles along a military corridor. Unknown to them, across town, unmarked teams set portable arrays on a hill, pointed skyward, and packed out before sunrise. This was the moment everything changed. Failures became the evidence. Satellite anomalies clustered in the weakened shield over the South Atlantic. Operators reported transient upsets in memory and power systems, shrugged, and filed anomalies. Independent trackers overlaid orbs with those windows and found timing that wasn't random. It wasn't proof. It was a clock. Inside FI 2025, the doctrine snapped into place. You don't hire AI to admire stars. You hire it to follow patterns too fast for people. The plan's 4 lines of effort, governance, culture, adoption, partners, read like a quiet admission. The system we're watching is structured, layered, and active. The public posture stayed careful. AARO reiterated, no verifiable extraterrestrial tech. But field behavior betrayed a different truth. If you are deploying overnight teams under training, near grids with recurring orbs, you've accepted the pattern whether you name it or not. Stakes, plainly. If the network is damping outbound noise, we're inside someone's rules. Our launches are louder. Our constellations are thicker. Our broadcast footprint has never been bigger. And yet, in key moments, Earth gets quieter. Radar that should see doesn't, radios that should carry don't, and people near low-altitude events get nudged out of the way one headache at a time. 3 days earlier, something strange occurred over a substation. Home security cameras caught a triangle hanging too still, its corners blinking out of sync with aviation logic. 20 minutes later, the station tripped, then reset. Utility logs called it a transient. Residents called it eerie. The next morning, fresh vehicle tracks cut into damp soil near a ridge, ending where a tripod's legs would stand. If the sky changed, the ground told the story first. Scorched stone, metallic dust, corridors nobody claimed. Maybe criminal tunnels explain some of it. Maybe rare geology explains more. But the consistency across sites, the pairing of heat marks with persistent Type 3 returns, set the hypothesis. You're looking at control points. Type 4 hubs, subterranean nodes that push up commands and pull down telemetry, while the visible spheres act like the fingertips. You don't have to believe it. You have to follow the repeatables, equidistant spacing, synchronized pulses, damping during critical windows, and footprints on the hill before dawn. That's not myth. That's practice. And practice, once it sets, is hard to turn off. Underground traces, the hubs no one claimed. Utah came first because the heat marks didn't care about theories. In a sandstone corridor off a dry wash, the wall wasn't burned, it was glazed. A band the width of a forearm ran waist-high for 30 feet. Stone fused into a vitreous ribbon that caught headlamp beams like a dull mirror. You could scrape it with a knife and hear the blade complain. In the dust along the floor, a volunteer pulled a magnet through a shallow arc and came up with flecks that clicked together like filings from a lathe. Local law said smugglers had carved closer to the border and left engineering behind. This wasn't that. No tracks, no ventilation, no shoring that human crews need to keep roofs from killing them. Just a corridor that didn't belong to the geology it cut through. 2 weeks later, Cappadocia offered the same language in different rock. In a side chamber off a known troglodyte complex, the arched ceiling bore a shadow line like a painter's tape edge. Below it, stone showed a faint polish. Above it, raw tufa stayed chalky and old. Somebody had pushed heat along the curve and stopped at the line like a template. Tour guides called it centuries of smoke. A geologist knelt, ran fingers over the boundary, and shook his head. Smoke stains sink into pores. This surface felt sealed, as if the rock had been persuaded to remember another arrangement of itself. Argentina made it harder to ignore. Far from mining belts and tourist maps, A vertical shaft dropped into air cool enough to fog breath. 50 meters down, a landing opened onto a grid of straight cuts, right angles your body senses before your eyes do. Along one wall, the telltale gloss band appeared again, this time interrupted by small oval scars like sockets. A field team lifted metallic specks with tape, later noting magnetic response stronger than common or dust. One sample tested as an alloy with ratios that didn't match industrial residue profiles from nearby regions. Labs argued over contamination. The site stayed quiet, except for a story whispered by a worker who swore he saw something tall and matte pass across corridor without sound. That's where the footage enters, and where caution has to stay glued to every frame. Utah cameras, stabilized and enhanced by amateurs, show elongated figures moving in low light. Similar silhouettes surface from expeditions in Turkey and Argentina. Same proportions, same indifferent gait, same refusal to interact. The clips are disputed. No independent forensic lab has confirmed their authenticity. Compression artifacts can lie, and pareidolia can turn shadows into silhouettes we're primed to fear. Still, the consistency across locations bothered people who've watched too many hoaxes to be impressed by shaky surprises. If it's a trick, it's a disciplined one replicated continents apart. Meanwhile, the line between what's confirmed and what's claimed needs bright paint. Criminal tunnels are real. U.S. border authorities publish schematics of cross-border burrows with lighting, ventilation, even rail. Those are engineered by people for profit, and they leave signatures: spoil piles, generator fumes, tire tracks, procurement trails. The corridors we're talking about lack those fingerprints and sit far from the economics that make criminal digs worthwhile. That doesn't prove ultra-terrestrial. It just removes the easy answer from the top of the stack. What the walls recorded wasn't art. It was heat. The scorched ribbons read like traces of a tool that maintained standoff from surfaces, painting energy into stone along controlled paths. The oval sockets interrupting bands in Argentina look like mounts or pass-throughs, not decoration. In Cappadocia, the arched ceiling line suggests calibration against curvature, as if a device was tuned to follow geometry, not guesswork. And those metallic flecks? Maybe mining residue, maybe not. The magnet doesn't care either way. It pulls, and the flecks come. Overlay those sites with reported Type 3 activity, and you get another repeatable persistence. The same counties, the same valleys, the same plateaus host low-altitude lights year after year, while the rest of the map flickers on and off with news cycles. If Type 3 behaves like local sensors, then corridors beneath persistent returns start to look less like curiosities and more like infrastructure. Call them Type 4 hubs if you need a label. Subterranean nodes acting as control points where energy flows are managed and commands are staged. In that frame, the spheres above ground aren't vehicles. They're the visible ends of invisible paths that begin underfoot. Skeptics ask the right questions. Could rare geologic processes fuse stone in bands? Yes, lightning can glaze sand. Volcanic vents can alter rock near conduits. Are these regions near such forces? In some cases, no. Could metals migrate along groundwater and leave magnetically active traces? Possibly, but patterned flecks and dust just inside entryways point to handling rather than seep. And the figures? If they're human, where are the footprints, the fiber, the trash? If they're not, what are they doing walking through corridors instead of flying past our skies like every story wants them to? The answer that fits the hypothesis is boring and therefore more likely. Technicians, not messiahs. Maintenance, not revelation. If a network exists, something tends it. If it runs through rock, somebody or something checks the lines. Unknown to ranchers fixing fence in Utah or guides selling hot air balloon rides in Cappadocia, portable tripods have appeared on ridges above these sites at odd hours. Locals wake to new indentations in clay and tire arcs that end in blind summits. The teams leave nothing behind but compression marks and a habit of working just before first light. No insignia, no statements, no public filings. You can deny spheres all day. You can't deny boots that press identical grids into 3 countries separated by oceans. What ties it together isn't belief. It's repetition. Heat bands at human height. Metallic flecks near entry planes. Right-angle corridors without the logistics to build them. Persistent Type 3 returns overhead. And sometimes, in the far end of a frame, a figure that moves like gravity means something different in there. The ground told the truth. The sky just made it visible. Heat, bursts, and bodies, the contamination pattern. The first hint wasn't a light, it was a sound you feel. In a split-level home outside Provo, a man fixing a sink froze as the air pressed inward, like an elevator starting down. His cat bolted. Then the kitchen radio hissed, a staticky veil for 6 seconds, and the hallway smoke alarm chirped with no smoke. Later, he told a neighbor his stomach turned and his teeth buzzed. The neighbor shrugged, until her daughter vomited twice that night and their Wi-Fi clock lost 13 minutes. Stakes didn't arrive as headlines. They arrived as small betrayals of normal. In living rooms near persistent Type 3 reports, people described nausea, metallic taste, sudden headaches, and a strange compulsion to step away from a doorway or staircase as if pushed by a thought that didn't use words. They weren't reading each other's posts. They were calling plumbers, replacing routers, visiting urgent care. The pattern stitched itself after the fact. Instrument people started showing up with cases that unfold like origami. One team, veterans of haunted house investigations who got tired of priests, set up RF meters, magnetometers, microwave detectors, and Geiger counters in basements that neighbors called off. They didn't chase voices. They watched timing. In 3 homes along a single corridor, their logs recorded short microwave bursts clustered between 2.4 and 3.8 gigahertz, spikes too brief to trip most consumer gear, but long enough to nudge body chemistry. On 2 nights, handheld gamma monitors ticked up in localized flashes, fractions of a microsievert above background, then back to normal inside a minute. Action makes you trust your eyes. A woman in Brazil stepped onto her balcony to film 3 dim orbs pacing a river. In the clip, her voice catches, then the camera dips, framing her feet as she staggers sideways without wind. In Ukraine, a father making tea looks up to see a soft white sphere hovering beyond the kitchen window. He smiles, calls for his son, then grips the counter and slides to the floor. His smartwatch records a heart rate jump, then a normalization he can't explain. In Turkey, 2 teens follow a low light down an alley, laughing until one bends over and dry heaves. Their audio captures a faint ticking not from the camera, but from a nearby smoke detector that chirps at odd intervals for the next hour. Meanwhile, something else was happening a mile above. Amateur radar hobbyists, the kind who can tell you the brand of a transponder by the way it coughs, logged shallow dips in local noise floors during orb alignments. It looked counterintuitive. Less noise while more strange things happened. But if a system was damping, making Earth quieter outward, then locally you'd get selective silence too. Holes where signal should be like a muffled shout in a stadium. Impact was immediate and then delayed. Immediate as in people stepping out of rooms without knowing why and later finding scorched arcs along a wall stud when they remodeled. Delayed as in small clusters of symptoms repeating near hotspot maps. Clinics in 3 counties reported upticks in short-lived nausea, dizziness, and skin tingling during weeks when Type 3 returns were heavy. Not mass illness, nudges. Enough to steer behavior. Enough to make families avoid a hallway or sleep on the couch for a week without articulating why. Now remember, this isn't proof of intent. Government labs have not confirmed a mechanism. AARO's line holds, no verified extraterrestrial tech, but the repeatables keep returning. Microwave spikes coincident with sightings. Occasional gamma blips. Consumer devices chirping in unison at the edges of events. And the human body, a sensor array we ignore until it makes us sit down. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. The poltergeist files don't look like demons under this light. They look like maintenance. Doors slam. Objects fall. Small fires start in waste baskets with no obvious source. Under old language, you call it haunting. Under new logs, you call it diversion. Move the humans before you paint the wall with heat. Not malice, priority. If you're servicing a line behind drywall, you don't negotiate with the family. You trip a breaker. The living flinch and walk away. Witnesses aren't interchangeable. Some lose 5 minutes. Others remember everything except the moment they step from stove to doorway, like a scene cut from a cheap edit. A pilot who saw lights pace his Cessna later couldn't recall the route from hangar to parking lot. His phone filled the gap with a string of location pings that made no sense. A zigzag across 2 blocks he swore he didn't walk. Exposure thresholds differ. After 2019, the worst burns vanish from records, replaced by subtler signatures that leave behind fewer scars and more questions. Meanwhile, the lab work keeps tugging the same thread. In a New England home with 3 incidents in a month, a team placed passive RF diodes on window frames and plaster seams. Twice, the diodes recorded transients that matched the shape of a directional sweep, an arc of amplitude that rose, held for seconds, then fell, with a notch where the sweep skipped an outlet bay as if avoiding copper. In Sao Paulo, a university team positioned scintillation counters in a grid and caught a single gamma spike aligned with a balcony rail. Localized, non-penetrating, gone before they could repoint. The stakes are simple. If this is incidental harm, we are collateral to a function that doesn't rank us high. If it's active steering, then homes are chessboards and we're the pieces that get moved with microwave nudges and a headache you'll describe as weather. Either way, the pattern doesn't care what we name it. It repeats because repetition is how systems work. While homes were nudged, the sky started coordinating. Triangles held position. Pulses synced with launch windows. And under the ridge, the glazed bands cooled to a dull memory while the cat refused to leave the space under the truck. Geometry in motion, the layered architecture. To understand why people kept calling them craft, we have to start with how our eyes lie. 3 lights fixed at the corners of a shape will trick your brain into filling in a dark body between them. That illusion is useful to a system built on trilateration, because the geometry is the thing, not the surface your mind invents. Patrick, Jackson's model gave names to the layers so we could track behavior instead of arguing about silhouettes. Type 3 close to ground, local sensors. Type 2 from treetop to lower edge of orbit, regional relays. Type 1 higher still, broad coordination. 3 points at each tier, sometimes more, spaced equidistant enough to solve for position in the volume they enclose. Here's where the math stops feeling theoretical. When you plot simultaneous sightings at different altitudes, the spacing scales but the ratios don't. The triangles breathe, edges lengthen with distance to the observed target, then contract, while angles hold within a narrow tolerance. That's surveyor logic with altitude awareness. You can fake a triangle. You can't fake its repeatability across stacked tiers that dwell, pulse, and pace in sync within error bars you can measure from porch cameras and pilot logs. Action made it obvious over military corridors. A Type 3 drifted along a fence line, 200 feet up, while a Type 2 triangle sat a few miles out, following the road grid like it was stitched into a map. Above both, high against the stars, 3 steady points formed a wide anchor that didn't move with the wind or with the aircraft underneath. Meanwhile, something else was happening in the timing. Pulses from the low set and mid-set lined up with a lag consistent with signal relay, milliseconds that matched the distance between layers. If you're looking for a network, lag is a signature as clear as a footprint in wet clay. The triangular formations aren't bodies, they're operational arrays. That matters because it explains why they appear over launch windows, nuclear arcs, and energy grids without needing wings or engines. An array can hold a volume steady without moving much at all. It can also reassign roles. Several nights in Brazil, 3 lights held a triangle while a 4th point drifted inside the shape, pausing near substations before sliding back to a node. The geometry didn't break, it flexed. That's template redundancy. Maintain coverage if a node detaches to sample or service. Synchronization with human corridors is the tell. The arrays don't chase airplanes, they pace lanes. They don't stalk a single rocket, they bracket altitude bands during ascent, then collapse when a vehicle clears a collision envelope. Over nuclear facilities, the behavior is slower but equally structured. Extended dwell with intermittent pulsing, an occasional swap of a corner point as if refreshing sensor lines without losing the solution. If you've ever watched a 3-leg survey team leapfrog tripods to keep a line true, you've already seen the move. What nobody knew in the early years was how altitude changes didn't change the rules. Backyard skywatchers caught triangles small enough to fit over a neighborhood. Astronomers logged larger patterns stretched across degrees of sky. When you scale both and measure, the angle discipline holds. That's not weather. It's not drones. It's a system preserving geometry regardless of size because the math needs it to. Meanwhile, military corridors contributed their own corroboration, whether they meant to or not. Flight trackers noticed that arrays showed up ahead of scheduled exercises, sometimes hours before, not trailing but preceding. In the Pacific, arcs of Type 2 nodes traced maritime staging routes nights before ships changed formation. In Eastern Europe, wide Type 1 triangles aligned over contested regions where GPS accuracy quietly degraded for civilian devices while military platforms reported no anomalies. Publicly, nothing connects. Operationally, alignment keeps reappearing. Dwell and pace are the other fingerprints. Arrays hold for minutes to hours, then slide with consistency that mirrors ground motion. A substation hop every few miles, a highway pace at convoy speed, a launch corridor climb at fractions of ascent velocity. When they move, they maintain spacing within tight bounds. When they stop, pulses often increase, and local interference reports tick up. Shorter radio range, brief radar softness, clocks that disagree until they don't. If you want a human moment to anchor the abstraction, take a pilot over Arizona who radioed 3 fixed lights, the size of a football field, holding above him at 15,000 feet. He described a solid triangle because his brain drew the lines. Ground witnesses saw the same 3 points, only spread wider than any craft should be at that altitude. Data from thermal drones captured colder voids between nodes, not a hull, just air. The geometry stayed. The body vanished when you stopped imagining it. The layered architecture explains why the same template shows up from living room windows to orbital cameras. It's coverage logic. Type 3 sketches the fine detail near surfaces, Type 2 stitches regions, Type 1 overseas. When a layer changes behavior, pulses rise, dwell lengthens, it's rarely alone. The tier above echoes with lag, and the tier below shows the human impact screens. Feel first, a router that drops, a radio that whispers, a smoke detector that chirps out of sync with the clock. Then came the maps that changed the room temperature. Not heat maps of sightings, but geometry maps, angles, edge ratios, lag signatures, overlaid on launch calendars and grid diagrams. The result didn't care what anyone believed. The arrays were where the rules mattered most. And the rules, by then, were writing themselves. Global hotspot mapping, clusters that shouldn't repeat. While triangles held their discipline, the maps did something cartographers hate.